Georgia Southern Football 90, featuring the defending NCAA national champion, Georgia Southern Eagles. This program is brought to you by Team Baden Isuzu. We are the competition. And by Atlantic Cellular. It's for you, Savannah. Now here's your host, Bill Edwards, and Georgia Southern University head football coach, Tim Stowers.
Good evening, everybody. The final game of the regular season. We hope there are going to be more. And Tim, the Samford game has to be one of those things that coaches worry about. You've had a big victory on the road. Samford comes in. Some people think, well, they're not that impressive, and that's a scary thought at times.
Samford's got a really good football team. They're getting better each and every year, and each and every week they're getting more and more players on scholarship every year. I think they've got a good, sound defensive football team. On offense, they're very explosive. They got two good wideouts. Darby, their quarterback, has been playing in that system a long time. You know, it's a Bobby Bowden system. You know, his son runs it. They'll run anything from any point on the field to any down. You know, the punt Ruski, the fumble Ruski, they might run the punt Ruski. They'll run a reverse. They'll run a reverse pass. They'll throw it back to the quarterback. And they've got a 1,000-yard rusher at tailbacks, Brady Jones, who's a fine football player. I'm concerned because, you know, everybody around Statesboro and Snookies and around the office and on campus is really talking about who you're going to play in the playoffs. Well, if we don't set our sights on beating Samford Saturday at 1 o'clock and everything we can do to beat Samford Saturday at 1 o'clock, they're good enough to beat us here at home, and they can knock us out of the playoffs. There might not be any playoffs. There might not be any next week. This might be the last game, who knows, for this 1990 football team.
After playing on that terrible field up at Chattanooga last week, Tim, and it looked like we saw a lot of people go down. How do we look health-wise?
We've got a bunch of people hurt. We really couldn't get a number one offensive line out at practice yesterday. There's some people beat up on defense. We are beat up more right now after this Chattanooga football game than any point in the football season. But I don't think anybody's hurt bad enough so they won't get a chance to play in the football game, at least not at this point, I don't think.
Okay, well, we'll see right after the ball game, and hopefully this will be another one in the W column.
Well, I hope so.
Okay, we'll see you with the first half of the Samford game right after this. It was 71 degrees at game time, a picture-perfect day for college football. And for the first time since Oglethorpe landed, Georgia Southern lost the coin toss. Surely that wasn't an omen, was it? It wasn't long before we were beginning to wonder. The Eagles took the field riding the crest of a 6-game winning streak, and surely Samford would not be the third team to beat the Eagles at home. It wasn't long, however, before we were beginning to wonder. After an initial first down, the Eagle defense wouldn't budge. Fullback Donnie Rory got only a yard when Curtis Gordon, Tim Brown, and Steve Busaletti stopped him cold. On second down, quarterback Ted Darby faked nicely and rolled out, only to hit tight end Dwayne Moore in a bad place, right in the hands. And on third down, Darby found it extremely difficult to pass with Darius Dawson in his face. So the Eagles got a crack at it. And on their initial play, darn near put 6 points on the board when quarterback Raymond Gross arched the bomb down to streaking Carl Miller, who had his defenders beat, but couldn't quite reach it. The best Raymond could do on second down was a keeper for 3 yards around the right side. And an incomplete pass on third down brought in Terry Harvin to punt the Bulldogs into a hole. It worked. Terry boomed it 51 yards downfield, and David Primus was dropped by Hal Radford a yard deeper from where he'd caught it. Only thing is, the Dogs didn't stay there very long. Ignoring conventional thinking, Ted Darby pitched back to Brady Jones for 8 yards, and they managed to keep the ball for the longest kind of time. On 3rd and 1, Darby pitched to Jones around the left end this time. It was good for 6 more. 7 plays later, Darby would connect with flanker Brian James for another dozen, up to their 46. But the Southern Inhospitality Committee didn't let it go much further. On 3rd and 17, a draw play to Donnie Rory lost 4 yards, thanks to Steve Busaletti. The Eagles got the ball back and began the first quarter's lone touchdown drive in spectacular fashion. Carl Miller took Raymond's pitch and got the Eagle Express rolling with a 34-yard gain, moving the ball from the GSU 24 to the Bulldogs 42. Here comes Train one more time. Then, following some fine blocking, Joe Ross wove his way for 9 yards up to the 33. An 11-yard pass on third down had the Eagles cooking at the enemy 20. You can credit Terrence Sorrell on the receiving end. And then Joe Ross, who always does a fine job following his blockers, picked a 15-yard hole down to the 5. Here's how it looked to us up in the press box. But from there, the Bulldog defense was tougher than a $2 steak sandwich. Joe was stopped cold on 3rd and 1. But on 4th and goal, packed in like proverbial sardines, Ross was up, and over. No question this time, 7-0 Georgia Southern after Mike Dow's kick. And certainly that would open the floodgates, right? Well, don't forget we've been in a drought. It looked good for a moment, though. On the second play of the second quarter, Darrell Hopkins took Raymond Gross' pitch and turned it into a 21-yard gain as Hop made it up to the 47. On the ensuing play, though, it was controversy time. Raymond fired to Carl Miller. Clearly a forward pass to everyone except the person who had the only vote in the area. He decided it was a lateral, therefore a fumble. The ball went over to the Bulldogs at the Southern 48. Carl couldn't agree less, nor anybody else wearing blue.
Had a lot to do with our lack of execution. We didn't play very well. I think after I missed that second pass I dropped and the referee ruled as a fumble. He said I caught it and it was a fumble. I don't see how that's possible. But after that, it just seemed like a mirage of defects started occurring in our defense. Drop balls, fumbles, missed assignments, missed execution, and I just don't know what happened.
Well, Carl, a stunned Parents' Day crowd was having a similar problem when the Eagles started playing Santa Claus. Happened like this. The Bulldogs were forced to punt, and sophomore Russell Nolan, who was spectacular all afternoon, put this one down about a foot away from the Eagles' doorstep. And 2 plays later, disaster. When Alonzo McGee was hit hard by linebacker Henry Thomas, the ball popped out like a ping pong ball, and Samford was in the driver's seat at the 1. One play was all they needed to take care of business. Darby pitched it to Brady Jones, and it was 7-all. Then late in the half, Shakespearean football, a virtual comedy of errors. Raymond pitched to Lester Eford, unsuccessfully, and Samford's Lee Frazier dove on it for the Bulldogs. But when Darby tried to go for it all on first down, Southern's Jim Mutimer skyjacked it at the 3 and brought it back 8 yards to the 11. Then from our you can't win for losing department on 3rd and 8, Raymond hit Carl Miller. It ricocheted off Carl right into the hands of Samford's Craig Connor, who took it back to the 11 going the other way before Gross became the tackler. The Bulldogs' one-play touchdown run worked again. Brady Jones carried again, too. 14-7 Samford, as the Paulson Stadium faithful became very quiet. The Eagle Express, however, wasn't out of steam just yet. Joe Ross would carry it for 8 around midfield, but it was costly. A hyperextended knee for his effort, and out for the rest of the afternoon. Playoff status, hopeful. A 17-yard strike to Carl Miller, and then a missile to Darrell Belzer for 24 yards, and 1st and goal at the 9. But the Southerners wound up having to settle for a 19-yard Mike Dowis field goal as time was running out, and Darrell Belzer probably summed it up best as the Eagles headed for the locker room down 14-10.
We took them lightly. I think we took them lightly. We didn't fully prepare for this game. We were thinking ahead, playoff time, and we learned our lesson, not to do that, and we're going to come back next week and be ready to go.
But at the time, it was a comeback in the second half and be ready to go. But first, the basketball team's all set. A chat with Frank Kearns after this timeout. Our halftime guest is the head basketball coach here at Georgia Southern, Frank Kearns, and just about to get ready. It's hard to believe, Frank, that the season is upon us. A disappointing season for the Eagles last year. I know you're anxious to get some new kids out there and see how they're going to work together.
Well, last year we finished 17-11, and which wasn't so bad. We kind of tailed off at the end, but this is sort of a rebuilding year. I think this is probably our greatest challenge in that we have so many new people and such a difficult non-conference schedule. And I think our biggest problem is a lack of physical strength. I think we have good basketball skills, but I'm not sure we're strong enough. So this is going to be a heck of a challenge with the schedule we have to play.
And some new people that you have this year. It's kind of, I guess you're as anxious as anybody to find out how those kids are going to work together.
Well, true. You always, it takes new people some time to really evaluate certain kids in practice. Look good and then don't get it done in games. Others don't show up so good in practice and perform well in games. So we need to play the 2 exhibition games to kind of evaluate a little further and then get into the regular schedule.
Tell us about that Bradley opener this week.
Well, that's sort of terrifying. Bradley returns 4 starters, including the leading scorer in the Missouri Valley Conference, returns a first-round draft choice, Curtis Stuckey. That's a great basketball league with great basketball tradition, and it's going to be a real challenge to our kids. We have 2 kids back that have played any Division I basketball at all to speak of, and so it's going to be quite a challenge.
Frank, you do a superb job, and we want to put some folks in the stands and hope you have a great season.
Thank you, Bill.
All right. Frank Kearns, the head basketball coach here at Georgia Southern. We'll be back with the second half highlights of the Samford game right after this. Now, this was more like it. Raymond Gross firing to Darrell Hopkins for 12 yards. The Eagle Express seemed to be back on track. A pitch to Hop for 6 more around the right corner. Then Air Raymond with a 15-yard flight to Darrell Belzer that got the Eagles down to the enemy 2. And on 2nd and goal, the big senior from Perry, Alonzo McGee, went sailing into the promised land on the 14th play of this 66-yard drive to retake the lead 17-14.
Games like that test a team's character. We weren't playing good at the beginning of the game. We came in at halftime, made some changes, and we came out and gave it the best we had, and we won the game.
You think maybe last year how badly we beat them over there might have had a little something to do with the attitude?
I think that had a lot to do. I think they had the revenge factor on their side, and they came here determined to give us a good game. They gave us a good game.
Eagle partisans kept expecting Samford to finally realize just who it was they were playing here. Forget about trying to win the ball game. No one bothered to convey that message to Samford, however. Ted Darby didn't seem the least bit concerned. He wasn't supposed to be picking the Eagle defense apart with passes to Brian James or Ed Smith, and certainly not a 26-yard strike to Donnie Rory, who took it to the GSU 15 on this play. But the Southern Inhospitality Committee rose up and made the Bulldogs settle for a game-tying field goal instead. It was 17 for everybody. Once again this week, the Eagles managed to keep the fans in the stands. No one was going home early in this one. As the third stanza drew to a close, it was 2nd and 17 when Raymond hit Darrell Belzer for a baker's dozen. The additional 4 yards was supplied by a screen pass to Carl Miller, who got good blocks from Belzer and Darrell Hopkins further upfield to get 16 more than was needed to keep the drive alive. And then there was Lester Eford, putting on the show, subbing for Joe, and Lester ran like a man possessed.
Well, once I got the call and I know what I had to do, especially when Joe went down in the ball game, early in the ball game, and I ran the ball pretty good, but I just got to give all the credit to the offensive line. They did a great job, you know. Rusty Parrish, John Wilson, Rex Snyder, and Miguel A.U., and Danny Smith. I just got to give them all the credit. They came through.
Lester ran the ball extremely well when Joe went down, and you know, that's a credit to him. You know, we've always said that we have the running backs in our backfield that, you know, if something happens, then we don't lose much. But Lester really ran the ball extremely well, and the offensive line opened the holes for him. He made great cuts to get the ball into the end zone.
The final quarter of the regular season began with Gross hitting Chuck McClurg for 7 yards before a defender tried to separate Chuck's head from his neck. On 2nd and 10, now operating from the Dogs' 30, Raymond hit the imaginary bullseye painted on Darrell Belzer's jersey for 13 more yards down the sidelines. And then it was Lester's turn. On 2nd and 5, this human bowling ball went down the 12-yard lane remaining, knocking over defenders like 10 pins. Okay, now it was time for Samford to wave the white flag. This is Georgia Southern you're playing, kids, not Northwest Squedunk Tech, you know. It would take a miracle to beat the Eagles on Glenn Bryant Field, Mr. Darby, so just forget it. And, hey, that looks like a 50-yard TD pass, and all Brian James has to do is catch it. He caught it. 24 all. Yeah, we saw you. So did Mark Giles.
That was a beautiful pass by the quarterback. The ball stayed in the air forever. It looked like a punt. You know, they had like a draw fake, and it got secondary to take a step. By that time, that receiver was gone. We turned around to chase him. The ball stayed in the air so long we couldn't catch him. It was a great play on offense.
With the clock winding down, Southern had to have the ball back. 9 minutes to go, and Steve Busceletti stuffed Donnie Rory for no gain. Then Giff Smith to the rescue. On 2nd and 10 from their 28, Giff fought off a block and tossed Ted Darby one way and caught the ball the other.
Yeah, it was nice to be able to make a big play. I looked up there at the clock, and it's 6 or 7 minutes, and you're looking at, you know, that's the last football I might ever play, and I wanted to be able to make something big happen. The coaches made a good call, got me in a position where I could do something, and I was fortunate enough to make the play. We turned the ball back over, but I still think it kind of gave us some momentum, and we kind of went after him after that and started getting pressure on the quarterback.
Giff Smith had 2 great plays there at the end of the game. I mean, he was not going to be denied. He separated the quarterback from the football on the first play, and then I believe he recovered the fumble. I mean, that's a senior. That's a 5th-year senior wanting to win, wanting to get in the playoffs, and wanting to preserve the tradition here that has been established at Georgia Southern and preserve an 8-3 football season.
The euphoria, however, was short-lived. On the very next play, Raymond tried to go up top. Unfortunately, Samford's Tony James was in the flight path and picked it off. He was hit. He fumbled. There was the usual mad scramble like shopping for a Cabbage Patch doll a few years ago, you may recall. But when all was said and done, Samford had the football. But no crying over fumbles now. The defense refused to let the Dogs have any more first downs. Mike West and Jim Mutimer saw to it here. While Giff Smith almost sacked Darby again on 2nd down, forcing him to get rid of the ball much too soon. Samford finally had to punt, and it was time for a Lester Eford encore. 6 yards on 1st down. 5 on 2nd. On his way to piling up 119 yards on the afternoon, 104 of them in the second half. Then, just to keep the defense honest, on 3rd and 6 from the Samford 35, a 7-yard aerial to Hop. Darrell Hopkins, that is. But of all of Lester's 119 yards Saturday, none was more significant than the last 15. Did he know it? You bet.
I know it was in once I made the cut after John Wilson block, and then I cut it back once again, and it was just me and the safety, and I wasn't going to be denied, and that safety knew I wasn't going to be denied once I put my hand in front of his face mask kind of stiff on, and I just wasn't going to be denied today.
So Lester gets the Master of the Understatement award for the game. It was 31-24 Southern, and just time for some final heroics in the final minute, courtesy of Mark Giles. Ted Darby had to hurry his pass because of a great pass rush. It was tipped by the intended receiver and picked off by Giles with another one of those circus catches. Victory would again belong to the Eagles.
I think he kind of scared me. I was backpedaling, and the guy was running the post route. Came off his hands, And the ball hit my hands and bounced back, hit my face mask, and then I caught him on the second try, and just turned up the field and got as far as I could. I was pretty excited about that play.
And meanwhile, linebacker Mike West said, ugly schmugly. We won, didn't we?
We just played a sloppy game, but we knew they had potential to beat us. It may have seemed differently than that, but they got a great ball club. They got a great coaching staff. They got probably the premier kickoff returner in the nation, and we did a good job with him, and I was pleased about that. But it's a victory and goes in the W column, and now we're going to the playoffs, and what more can we ask for after coming from 1-3?
Amen. And Coach Stowers will have a final comment in just a moment.